This podcast uses AI-generated content. All information is for general purposes only and does not constitute financial, investment, legal, or regulatory advice. Listeners should verify information independently and consult qualified professionals for personalized guidance. Welcome to the Luxembourg Fundcast. Today we're taking a deep dive, really getting into the weeds of corporate administration here in Luxembourg. It's quite a landscape, isn't it? Always evolving.
It really is. For leadership teams, it's this constant balancing act. You've got these incredibly detailed regulations on one side,
Right.
and the need to actually run a viable business on the other. It's complex.
Absolutely. And it feels like the pace of change is only accelerating.
Exactly. We're seeing several major forces intersecting right now. You've got the push from Europe, bodies like the European Banking Authority, the EBA, driving harmonization. Then there's that whole post-Open Lux pressure for real economic substance, making sure companies are genuinely managed from here.
No more letterboxes.
Precisely. And maybe the biggest shift, these new risk areas becoming central ESG, that's environmental, social, and governance, and digital resilience. Huge topics.
Okay, so that sets the scene nicely. For this deep dive, what's our mission? What are we going to cover?
Well, the plan is to break it down. First, look at the bedrock regulations, where this all comes from. Then dissect what a modern compliant team actually looks like, sort of the anatomy of it.
Right.
Then we'll explore these new frontiers, ESG and digital risk. And finally, touch on how you actually execute this stuff strategically, moving beyond just ticking boxes.
Sounds good. Before we jump into the history, you mentioned some critical developments demanding attention now. What are those?
Yes, three things really stand out. First, what I like to call the proportionality paradox. Sounds like it makes things easier, right? Proportionality.
You'd think so. Less burden for smaller firms.
Well, yes and no. It's not a free pass. It actually requires more rigorous, documented self-assessment. If you want a lighter touch, you need an absolutely ironclad written justification for the CSSF. It's a test of your self-analysis.
Okay, so flexibility comes with a heavy burden of proof. Interesting. What's number two?
Number two is the Chief Risk Officer's new teeth. There's been a really important update in CSSF Circular 24860.
Ah, yes, the CRO role.
Exactly. It fundamentally empowers the Chief Risk Officer, the CRO, to formally challenge decisions, even at the board level. It significantly strengthens that second line of defense, ignoring your CRO. That's now a documented risk for the board itself.
Wow, okay, that definitely raises the stakes. And the third one, you mentioned digital.
Yes, DORA's digital mandate. The EU's Digital Operational Resilience Act, DORAS. It's being brought into Luxembourg rules through things like CSSF 25883, the headline. ICT risk information and communication technology risk is now a top-tier board-level governance issue, just like capital or liquidity.
Right, it's not just the IT department's problem anymore.
Not at all. It's everyone's responsibility right from the top.
Okay, that's a great overview of the current pressures. Let's rewind a bit then. To really grasp this, where did modern governance in Luxembourg start? What's the foundation?
You really have to go back to December 2012. That's when the CSSF and the Commission de Surveillance du Secteur Financier introduced CSSF Circular 12552.
12552, okay.
This was a landmark. Before that, you had this kind of patchwork of older rules, some going way back. 12552 pulled it all together into one comprehensive source. It was very much reaction to the 2008 global financial crisis.
A consolidation effort, then. What were the key pillars it established?
It really laid down the DNA. A big one was reinforcing central administration, basically saying the strategic mind, the real management, has to be physically in Luxembourg. Demonstrably so.
Tackling that shell company image head on.
Exactly. It also codified what sound internal governance looks like. Clear structure, defined roles, effective controls, proper risk management, and it embedded the 4 I's principle.
Meaning collective responsibility.
Yes. Ensuring authorized management acts together. Usual control, no single person making huge calls alone. And crucially, it cemented ultimate responsibility with the board of directors. Committees advise, but the buck stops with the board. Non-delegable.
So, a really strong statement from Luxembourg back then, aligning with global standards, building substance. But things change, regulations evolve. Did 12552 stay the single rulebook?
It did, for about 8 years, covering both banks and investment firms. But then, in December 2020, we saw what you could call the Great Divergence.
The Great Divergence. Sounds significant.
It was. The CSSF brought in CSSF Circular 2758, specifically for investment firms, effective January 1st, 2021. From that point, 12552 became mostly for credit institutions, for banks.
Why the split? Why a separate rule book for investment firms?
It was a smart move, really, a shift towards more tailored, risk-based supervision, aligning with specific European Banking Authority guidelines for investment firms. The regulator recognized that, an investment firm's business model, its risks, they're just different from a traditional bank's.
Makes sense. Applying banking rules wholesale might not fit.
Right. It could be disproportionate, inefficient.
Huh.
So 2758 brought some key differences.
Like what, for instance?
Well, the scope was tailored. Rules about credit granting central to banks were largely removed for investment firms, where it's often just ancillary. There were specific governance tweaks, like needing at least one independent director for certain larger investment firms under the Capital Requirements Regulation, or CRR.
Okay.
Risk management became much more focused on market, operational, conduct risks, the things investment firms worry about most, rather than credit and liquidity risk, which dominate banking. And importantly, 2758 was one of the first to explicitly mention ESG.
Environmental, social, and governance factors.
Exactly. It required boards to consider sustainability factors and risks in their strategy. So this divergence brought more clarity in some ways, but also added complexity. You needed more specialized knowledge.
You mentioned proportionality earlier, calling it a double-edged sword. Let's circle back to that. What's the sharp edge? How does it work in practice?
Right, the double-edged sword. Proportionality is meant as a scaling factor. It lets firms tailor their set of controls, administration to their size, their complexity, their specific business.
So smaller, simpler firms can do less.
Not exactly do less. They can potentially have a lighter framework, but, and this is the crucial bit they have to prove why it's appropriate, the burden of proof is entirely on the firm.
So no automatic discounts.
None at all. You need a really thorough, rigorous, and importantly, written internal analysis justifying every single decision where you apply proportionality.
Can you give an example?
Sure. Let's say a smaller firm thinks it doesn't need a full-time chief compliance officer. They can apply for an exemption, but they can't just say they don't need one.
Right.
They need a detailed written analysis signed off by management, approved by the board, making a compelling case to the CSSF based on their specific activities, scale, risks, etc., showing why a full-time CCO isn't proportionate for them.
And corporate administration's role here is key.
Absolutely critical. They often facilitate and document this whole self-assessment process, that proportionality analysis. It becomes a key document the CSSF will likely ask for first during an inspection. The quality of that justification matters a lot.
Okay, we've got the regulatory map. Now let's talk about the people, the team structure, the anatomy of a compliant corporate administration team, starting at the top. The board of directors. What's their role in this picture?
They are absolutely the apex of governance. Their job isn't the day-to-day running, it's setting the course and overseeing it, defining the strategy, setting the firm's risk appetite, how much risk it's willing to take, and keeping a very close eye on the authorized management.
And it's not just about having smart individuals on the board.
No, the CSSF stresses collective suitability. The board as a group needs the right mix of skills, experience, qualities, what they call collective fitness. Finance, legal, maybe tech now, market knowledge. It depends on the firm. And they need ongoing training to stay sharp.
You mentioned diversity earlier, too.
Yes, that's mandated now. Thinking about age, gender, background, experience, it's not just box ticking. The idea is broader perspectives lead to better, more robust decisions, less groupthink.
Makes sense.
And for significant firms, you need independence. The chair shouldn't also be on the staff. The board is supported by committees, like the audit committee, but these are advisory. The final decisions, they rest with the board.
Okay, so the board sets direction. The day-to-day execution then falls to the authorized management, the engine room, as you call them.
Exactly. Their main job is running the business, executing that strategy, but always within the risk appetite and policies the board set.
And that four eyes principle is key here, too.
Absolutely fundamental. Collective responsibility. Big decisions need mutual control. You might divide up tasks internally. One person focuses here, another there. But legally, they are collectively responsible for the firm's sound management.
So multiple layers of oversight. This brings us to the famous 3 lines of defense. Can you walk us through that?
Sure. It's a standard model, but crucial. The first line is the business itself, the operational units managing their own risks day to day.
Where the risks are generated.
Precisely. The second line is where compliance and risk management sit. These functions need to be permanent, independent, with enough authority and resources. They're led by the Chief Compliance Officer, the CCO, and the Chief Risk Officer, the CRO.
Can those roles be combined?
In smaller firms, yes, under proportionality. But again, you need a specific, well-justified request to the CSSF explaining why it makes sense for your particular setup.
And this is where the CRO's new teeth come in, that change you mentioned from Circular 24860.
Exactly right. This is a really significant evolution, effective since September 30th, 2024. The CRO doesn't have a formal veto power anymore, technically. But they are now explicitly empowered to challenge decisions made by management and the board.
Challenging them how?
Formally. If the CRO disagrees with a decision on risk grounds, they can raise a formal objection, and the reasons for that objection must be documented.
Ah, so it forces the issue into the open, onto paper.
Precisely. If management or the board decides to push ahead against the CRO's documented concerns, they're creating a very clear record for the regulator to see later. It forces a transparent discussion about risk at the very top. It really strengthens that second line.
Okay. And the third line?
The third line is internal audit. They provide that independent, objective check on the whole system: governance, risk management, internal controls. They report typically to the audit committee or the board directly.
With all these layers and responsibilities, documentation must be king. The paper trail, as you called it. What are the absolute must-haves?
You absolutely need a solid paper trail. It's the evidence of good governance. Key things include the core governing documents, the written commercial strategy, the risk strategy. Both need formal board approval.
Okay.
Your outsourcing policy is huge. It needs to cover due diligence on providers, ongoing monitoring, and really importantly, clear exit strategies. Think about termination clauses. You need enough notice to actually move the service somewhere else smoothly if things go wrong.
Practical stuff.
Very practical. Then, a comprehensive conflicts of interest policy and register. There are strict rules around transactions with related parties or loans to board members. You also need a new product approval process, or NPP, a formal way to assess any new service or product before launch, identifying all the associated risks.
Right. Think before you leap.
Exactly. And finally, compliance and AML-CFT reporting. The CCO has to do an annual summary report, and Circular 2758 specifically requires a detailed chapter just on anti-money laundering and countering the financing of terrorism, AML-CFT. Plus, the separate AML report from the Responsibility to Control, the RC, needs to be clearly distinct.
That's a lot of documentation. It covers the traditional risks well. But you mentioned new frontiers, ESG, and digital resilience. How are they being woven into this governance fabric? Let's start with ESG.
ESG has had a fascinating journey. It really went from being, nice to have corporate social responsibility thing.
Soft law, maybe?
Exactly. To now being a hard, prudential regulatory requirement from the CSSF. Prudential meaning it's about the safety and soundness of the institution. Circular 2758 for investment firms is very clear. Boards must consider sustainability aspects and related risks in their strategy and business model.
And the CSSF is watching this closely.
Very closely. They've explicitly said they plan to deepen their supervision of ESG risks and embed requirements further in future updates. So for corporate administration, this means expanded the risk horizon way beyond the usual suspects like credit or market risk.
To include things like climate change.
Yes, climate risk, both physical risks like floods and transition risks like policy changes impacting investments, but also social risks, governance risks.
Yeah.
Reputational damage from getting it wrong. It's not a separate green exercise. It has to be part of the main board discussion, part of strategic planning.
Okay, and the other big frontier, DORA, the Digital Operational Resilience Act. You said it elevates ICT risk.
It completely changes the game. DORA basically says information and communication technology risk, including cybersecurity, is just as important from a prudential perspective as having enough capital or managing liquidity. It's a fundamental, non-delegable responsibility of the management body, the board.
And how does Luxembourg implement this EU regulation?
Primarily through updates to existing circulars. For example, CSSF Circular 25883, which came out April 9th, 2025, specifically amends the key circular on outsourcing arrangements, 22806, to bake in the DORA requirements. But remember, DORA itself became fully applicable across the whole EU from early 2025, so firms should be well down the implementation path by now.
So what are the core obligations under DORA that firms need to grapple with?
There's several pillars. First, that ultimate board responsibility for ICT risk. Second, needing a comprehensive ICT risk management framework, documented procedures for identifying risks, protecting systems, detecting breaches, responding, and recovering.
Standard cybersecurity lifecycle stuff, but formalized.
Exactly, but with regulatory teeth. Third, really prescriptive rules for managing third-party ICT providers, especially cloud services. And fourth, A long list of mandatory contractual clauses that must be included in ICT outsourcing contracts.
Non-negotiable clauses.
Often, yes. Things ensuring the firm and its regulators have full access and audit rights to the service provider. This fundamentally changes the dynamic. Your chief technology officer or chief information security officer, they're now critical voices in the governance discussion. Corporate admin needs to make sure the whole framework reflects that.
So we have the rules, the team, the new risks. How does this translate into execution, particularly around contracts, which sounds like a major headache now?
It definitely requires skill. We call it the art of legal negotiation, beyond the commercials. Post-DORA, when you're negotiating, say, a cloud service agreement, your primary goal isn't just price or service levels anymore. It's ensuring full regulatory compliance is embedded in that contract. And the art is convincing the provider. Precisely. Imagine you're a Luxembourg firm trying to get a giant global tech provider to accept very specific Luxembourg or EU law clauses about audit rights or data secrecy. Their standard contract won't have that.
They might just say no.
They might try. The skill lies in preparing thoroughly, knowing what's truly non-negotiable from a regulatory standpoint, and clearly articulating the regulatory risk and potential personal liability for directors if these clauses aren't included. You have to make it their problem too, in a way.
What are some of those must-have clauses you need to fight for?
Key ones, based on CSSF rules and DORA, include absolutely unrestricted access and audit rights for the firm, its auditors, and the regulators, strong data security and professional secrecy clauses compliant with Luxembourg law and GDPR, robust business continuity and exit strategy provisions, including those long termination notice periods we mentioned, and of course, explicit reference to full DORA compliance, making sure all the required contractual elements from DORA itself are covered, things like performance targets, reporting obligations, even requirements around penetration testing.
This all sounds incredibly complex and, frankly, expensive, which brings us to the art of legal pricing. How do firms value this level of governance work?
You're right, the costs are going up. You need highly skilled people, robust technology, constant regulatory monitoring, policy updates, more audits. DORA and ESG integration are major projects.
So how do you justify the fees?
The value proposition has to shift. You're not just selling basic administration anymore. A premium price isn't justified by the number of pages in the board pack. It's justified by the quality of strategic advice, the robustness of the compliance framework you're building and maintaining, and crucially, the tangible reduction in regulatory risk and potential personal liability for the client and its directors.
So you're selling assurance, peace of mind.
Exactly. You're selling expert governance, assurance, risk mitigation.
Yeah.
You're building the documented defense that might save a client millions in fines or protect a director from regulatory action. That has real value.
Looking ahead, what are the key timelines for implementation people need to keep in mind?
Okay, so what's recently happened? CSSF Circular 24860, the one giving the CRO new teeth. That's been applicable since September 30th, 2024. Firms should have already adjusted for that.
Right. What's coming up fast?
The big one is DORA alignment. CSSF Circular 25883 came out in April 2025, giving the Luxembourg specifics. But the underlying DORA regulation was applicable across the EU from early 2025. So firms really need to be in the final stages of their DORA implementation right now. It's a massive undertaking.
And what's ongoing?
Well, continuous compliance with the core circulars 12552 for banks, 2758 for investment firms. That never stops. And ESG supervision is ongoing and evolving. The CSSF is taking a gradual approach, but scrutiny will only increase and requirements will likely become more specific over time.
So pulling it all together, we've covered the rules, the team, the new risks, the execution. What does it take to go beyond just being compliant? What defines excellence in corporate administration in Luxembourg today? What's the real unique selling point?
Excellence is about being proactive and strategic, not just reactive. It's several things. First, proactive regulatory intelligence. Not just reading circulars when they land, but monitoring what's coming down the pipeline, national and EU level, participating in consultations, anticipating trends, getting frameworks ready before the rules hit.
Being ahead of the curve.
Exactly. Second, true mastery of proportionality. Not using it as an excuse to do less, but using it smartly. Facilitating and documenting a really robust, defensible analysis that shows deep understanding of the business and the regulation. That impresses supervisors.
Okay. What else?
Strategic integration. seamlessly weaving these complex new things, ESG, DORA, into the existing governance fabric. So ESG metrics aren't just in a separate report, they're in the board dashboard.
Yep.
DORA principles aren't just in an IT policy, they inform the core outsourcing policy. It's about making it holistic.
Becoming part of the business fabric.
Yes, and that leads to the trusted advisor role. Moving beyond admin support to being a genuine strategic partner, giving proactive advice on how governance and regulation impact business decisions, helping shape strategy, not just recording it.
And technology.
Absolutely crucial. Technological fluency, using tech not just for efficiency, but for better risk management, better data analysis, smarter regulatory reporting, maybe using APIs, application programming interfaces to pull data directly for those complex CSSF surveys, freeing up people for higher value thinking. That combination, that's excellence. So as you can probably tell, it's a demanding field, corporate administration in Luxembourg today. Highly complex, constantly shifting, but also incredibly important strategically. Getting it right isn't just about avoiding trouble. It's about building trust, ensuring resilience, and actually creating a competitive advantage.
This podcast uses AI-generated content. All information is for general purposes only and does not constitute financial, investment, legal, or regulatory advice. Listeners should verify information independently and consult qualified professionals for personalized guidance. Hit that like and subscribe button. It was the Luxembourg Fundcast for you today.